Folks, I'm talking to Charlie Kirk. We're talking about everything, and by everything, I mean people trying to steal America from the American people. Charlie, you just mentioned Zuckerberg of Facebook gave, I heard, $400 million to what?
So it was a sleepy 501c3. They had about a $500,000 budget called the Center for Technology and Civic Life. They really didn't do anything dramatic until they got approached, and there was a plan that was hatched around April or May of this year, probably because the big tech companies were afraid of a antitrust complaint that was coming their way very soon from a Democrat Congress. So they kind of wanted to show the Democrats with a wink and a nod, hey, we're doing the good work. Because you have to understand, these antitrust complaints that the Democrats were floating in Congress were nothing more than a legislative extortion scheme to try to get the multi-trillion-dollar companies to get involved in this election on their behalf, because they blamed Facebook for Donald Trump's election wrongly in 2016. Of course, they'd actually never blamed their candidate or their tactics or their messaging. So then Zuckerberg donates $350 to $400 million to the Center for Technology and Civic Life. And again, you go from a $500,000 operating budget, Eric, to $350 to $400 million. You're probably going to have a pretty good idea of where that money's going. Zuckerberg's not going to execute that wire transfer or donate that stock if he doesn't know in a pretty form or fashion that that's going to benefit something he cares about. And so under the virus restrictions that all of these state, local municipalities were under, particularly Philadelphia, Detroit, Milwaukee, Georgia, Maricopa County, and Phoenix, the Center for Technology and Civic Life started to work hand in hand with the Secretary of State's office and the county recorders in these massive counties in swing states, primarily swing states, but they peppered around other states just to cover themselves legally. And they started to install these massive drop boxes. And this is just one thing they did all across the country. And you might have saw them where then you could put ballots in them. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, as people were getting 10, 15, 20, 30 ballots sent to their home wrongly, and everyone wears masks all the time, you could, in an unidentified way, drop off 30 ballots into these drop boxes, and then the ballots are effectively laundered. This is exactly what happened. So you have dirty ballots that if you were to go through the regular process of going to the county recorder's office and turning them in with your ID, they'd say, well, show me if this is really your ballot. You can then drop them into these boxes, and you're completely cleansed of it. And you can't get caught because it's not mail fraud. So there's no record of it going actually into the U.S. the Postal Service mail system. It's this very weird kind of short circuitry of the elections. Beyond that, they provided the vote counting tabulators. They provided grants for people that actually had back end and front end access to how the votes were counted. I'll give you another example. An organization by the name of Rock the Vote. You may have heard this organization before.
Of course. Yeah.
They were given front-end access to input ballots, front-end access to input ballots in Pennsylvania and Michigan. So they were given basically the passwords to the Secretary of State's office. This is discovered by the great Phil Klein, who we've had on our program, former Attorney General of Kansas. I encourage you to have him on. He's uncovered a lot of this.
If you give us his information, he's been on my list. I'll get that.
He's great.
When we go off the air.
But this is just one of the many different scandals that were operating together. And what's very clear, though, the only through line here, though, Eric, and you mentioned it, is that powerful people are behind all of these. This is not an organic thing where people are rising to the streets or big rallies are happening. No. Center for Technology and Civic Life, a guy worth $110 billion writes a $350 to $400 million check. Wow. All of a sudden, big tech starts censoring all conservative voices. The multi-trillion-dollar companies get involved in our elections. Signature verification. Who changed that? Secretary of State's office, in collusion and conjunction with people like Stacey Abrams and the multi-billionaire lobby, got involved and changed the way we did elections and signature verification. All of these things were plotted months in advance. So while we were worried about the polls, maybe not, we were really loving voter registration. All of a sudden, they were changing the way that elections were done. And here's the proof. If you want to say, well, Charlie, how can you prove this? Florida. That's how I can prove it. It's the only state where none of this crap was allowed. Ron DeSantis said, you're not putting these boxes on our streets. We do elections our way. If you request a ballot, you have to verify the signature. Everything was done beautifully in Florida. I voted in Florida, Eric, and I saw firsthand when I voted early in Sarasota County, Florida, a guy tried to come in and vote right next to me as I was signing in, and they said, well, sir, you checked in. They said, sir, it shows that we already sent you a ballot. He says, I didn't get a ballot, making some excuse. They said, we can't let you vote today because we already sent you a ballot unless you surrender your ballot. He got frustrated and left. I said, right there is an example of voter fraud that just got deterred. The system was working in front of my very eyes. And Florida, what did Donald Trump do? Won by 4 points. So you have a battleground state where Florida used to be decided by 10,000 votes or less. It was always razor thin. They did their elections the right way. Do you remember in 2018, you had Brenda Snipes in Broward County where you had Senator Bill Nelson against then Governor Rick Scott? This is just 2 years ago. Brenda Snipes kept on finding ballots and they were driving in the middle of the night. You know what Ron DeSantis did the moment he became governor? He said, I demand your resignation. We're redoing the way we do elections in this state. And all of a sudden, Florida had their results by 9 o'clock Eastern, and Donald Trump wins by 4 points.
Unbelievable. I knew there was a reason I was going to have you on this program today. I got to tell you, Charlie, this is all wonderfully clarifying, not just for me, but I'm sure for most of my audience. Where do you think we are? Do you think where do you think we go between here and December 14th?
I think the state legislatures need to start stepping up, and I think we're starting to see that. I think every state legislature in Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania,